And it's just about 8 o'clock here on Talk City 91.1 FM. And at this time, each and every Wednesday evening, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Indaba program here on Talk City 91.1. And again, another packed program coming your way. And we have the African report, of course. We have a report from the Secretariat by Renee Francois. And of course, our feature, exploring alternative approaches and solutions to address violent crime in Trinidad and Tobago, with special guests Danielle Frederick and Mtima Solwazi. Without further ado, let me join Renee and Dr. Fergus. Good evening to both of you.
Hi, good evening.
Ruskin. Good evening, Ruskin, and nice having you again once more at 91.1 FM. Good evening to the listeners on 91.1 FM, our oldest audience. Good evening to the listeners and viewers on YouTube and Facebook. Welcome to another edition of the Africa Report, where knowledge grows. I think I'm hearing Shabaka somewhere in the background there. Yes, so we should be joined shortly by Shabaka, and of course, every other week you're going to see Renee Francois as a regular co-host on the program. She's doubling up this evening and will be bringing us the report from the ESCT Secretariat. That will be coming up shortly. As you heard from Ruskin, the Africa report would follow, and that would be the second in a series I'm doing on living African personalities. This evening we focus on business personality from Ghana. And we have two special guests in studio this evening to bring new perspectives on the issue of crime and violence in Trinidad and Tobago, an issue which we got going last edition of the program. Very exciting discussion, and most likely we're going to have to continue this discussion for quite a while, bringing in different specialists to see how we can address the situation, but also how we can find solutions or recommend solutions to the various authorities responsible for implementing a better Trinidad and Tobago. Yes, Renee, you want to greet our audience?
Yes. Hi, good night, everyone. Good night to all our listeners and our guests who are about to join us. Good night, Dr. Fergus. I'm hoping that Shabaka will join us shortly. But if not, well, while we wait, I just want to let people know what's going on at the Emancipation Secretariat. So we are fast approaching African History Month here in Trinidad and Tobago, and it's observed in November. And one of the activities that Emancipation Support Committee does in commemoration of this month is the National African History Quiz and our National Spoken Word Competition. We're very, very excited that the competition is about to start. Right now, we have 23 contestants who would have advanced from our regional spoken word competition, going on to our national spoken word competition. And for those of you who are not familiar, the spoken word competition is really geared towards children of primary school age. They get pieces that the speeches, poetry, stories, and calypsos. And then when we go to the National Spoken Word Competition, we really are zeroing and focusing on calypsos because we understand that this tradition of calypso really has its origins in African roots with the griots of West Africa. And so for us, it's another way of ensuring that this tradition is carried on from generation to generation. And I think also because of where we are in society, where persons tend to focus a bit more on soca, we still want to acknowledge those calypsos, those really positive calypsos that would have gone by. So I'm really excited to see what the students are going to do with these new selections that we're providing them with. And now we are also in the midst of preparing for our National African History Quiz. Staff is very busy. Dr. Fergus, you would know, you've been assisting us along the way with the editing, the reviewing, the printing, the binding of the booklet, because the pieces we prepare in house, and yeah, it's it's tedious, but it's a labor of love, because when you see the final booklet and the content in it is something that we're very proud of, and it's something that the children enjoy. And one of the things that I like that we do at ESU is that we also select topics that the children can also use, or is easily translatable um, to SBAs. You know, there have been times where teachers have reached out to us asking us for information and advice about SBA topics. And, you know, it's been very simple to say, like, all right, Miss, I'm forwarding you this booklet. This booklet has content on it. So we're excited. We have 26 schools. It is not too late to register with the National African History Quiz. So if you are interested, please visit the ESC's Facebook page. There's information about how the rules, some very brief rules and regulations about the competition, but most importantly, the link to register. And if you're still unsure, please give us a call, and we're very much happy to provide you with the information that you need. So yes, we're very busy. Very few periods where the office is not engaged intensely in an activity, but I think everything that we do at the secretariat is a labor of love.
Could you tell us, if you can recall off the top of your head, the defending champions? If they are defending champions, at least the winners of last year would be.
I believe, and I stand corrected, but I believe it's St. Francois Girls College. I'm not entirely sure. Yeah.
Are they in this year?
Yeah. So they, in speaking with the program officer, my understanding is that they are prepared to take part in the competition, and they are looking forward to the orientation and receiving the booklet. And yes, I believe they are, because I think overhearing a conversation about defending their trophy. So we'll see. I'm excited. I'm always excited when St. Francois Girls College is participating and to see them advance. And we have some schools that have been taking part for years that really. So this idea of colleges and prestige and that kind of thing, it sometimes comes into play in at the quiz, but I love how these government and these government schools stand their ground. They show that we are just as capable, we're just as bright, we know this work. You know, it resonates with them, and it's something that I really enjoy seeing them. And you really see these students develop this sense of teamwork and camaraderie among themselves. So I'm excited to see, not that I don't enjoy spoken word competition, I do. But to me, sometimes the stakes feels higher with the National African History Quiz.
Yeah, but that means, could you recall the spoken word defending champion?
Oh gosh, Dr. Fergus.
Okay.
And I'm being corrected here. Apparently the defending champions is Naparima Girls College. I am so sorry.
Okay, I withdraw that one. But I know there is at least one area that addresses reparations. And
yes.
Is there also a reparatory justice topic or subject in the spoken word? And
so I believe there is one song for sure that deals with reparations for the spoken word competition. And like I said, with the booklet for the National African History Quiz, we are doing this idea, or maybe the word isn't idea, but examples of reparations. Again, to bring home the idea as to why reparations is due to persons of African descent, and of course the Indigenous community here in the Caribbean. So I'm also excited to see how the students grapple with that idea of reparations as they continue, as they get familiar with the content, and also because a lot of them they do their own independent research when they come across some interesting topics. So I'm excited to see how they're going to explore and learn more about about the idea of reparations. Yeah.
Okay, great. So we
Right.
can
And just
take
now,
that as information,
some
very valuable
one
information.
one
Yeah.
second. I'm so sorry. So, because I'm being corrected here, the defending champions for the National African History Quiz is Naparima Girls College, and for the spoken word competition is Samia Ashby of Brazil RC.
Great, great.
Yes.
Okay. Right. So we got our fact checker somewhere in the background there, in the dark shadows in the background, and we are grateful for that. Okay, so at this point, we are going to move on to the next segment of the program as Renee gets ready to bring up that segment, the Africa Report, which is pre-recorded. As I said, this feature is on an entrepreneur from Ghana. He is selected because I think he can be an outstanding example of a rags to riches kind of story, very humble, although extremely wealthy. And I think it could be an example for many of us, not just struggling at the bottom, looking to rise, but even as you succeed, what do you do with your success? The kind of impact you can have, to ensure maximum benefit from your own success across different layers of society. So bring that report up and let's hear the Africa report for this.
In Africa, you have to be a gorilla. You have to think like a gorilla. You think like a dwarf, you become a dwarf. You think and walk like a gorilla, you become a gorilla. No two ways about it.
That's Danielle Macaulay, founder and executive chairman of the MacDan Group of Companies, at his home with Joy News interviewer Aisha Ibrahim. This week's Africa Report highlights the second of 4 personalities that exemplify the doggedness, the resilience, the farsightedness, and the entrepreneurship of the African spirit, girded by Ubuntu philosophy, I am because you are. Their work collectively reignites our confidence as a people who pioneered all human developments and achievements for millions of years, and demonstrates how we could all triumph over the debilitating legacies of colonialism and the entrapments of neocolonialism. Whenever we fail, the fault is often in ourselves, not in our stars. Danielle Macaulay is one of Africa's most successful entrepreneurs and equally impactful philanthropist. I rank him alongside Aliko Dangote and Alan Onyema of Nigeria, but a slight notch higher because he still walks in the trenches from which he emerged. Nyenshia is his Ga name, meaning the eagle. To Africans, a personal name is an element of one's personhood. Macaulay demonstrates this principle in the title of his autobiography, The Path of an Eagle, Despair, Hope, and Glory. Macaulay was born in Accra, the capital of Ghana, 53 years ago, in a very large family and in very humble circumstances.
Those days, you need to actually carry your chair and table
to school.
You have to walk barefooted.
My goodness.
So, growing up, that is what happened. And
you walked barefooted to school?
To school, till middle school for 1.
Goodness me.
Yeah, I mean, I got my first sandals by selling some togbe, you know togbe?
Togbe is a kind of puff-puff. Little Ninsha also sold gasoline on the streets. He dropped out of university because he was unable to pay his tuition fees. 15 years or so later, he resumed his tertiary education, eventually obtaining his Bachelor of Science and Executive Master of Business Administration degrees. He also holds several postgraduate certificates in entrepreneurship, leadership, transport, logistics, and an honorary doctorate from London School of Business. Macaulay is currently married to 2 wives, Abigail and Roberta, with whom he has 10 children, and looking forward to 12. The children are evenly divided, 5 with each wife, and another equal division of 5 boys and 5 girls. In 1999, Corley founded the MacDan Shipping Company, which has a presence in over 2,000 airports and seaports worldwide. Not surprisingly, he is popularly known as MacDan, not Macaulay. Today, MacDan Shipping is one of several MacDan trademarks. Others include MacDan Aviation, MacDan Logistics, Eagle Salt, and Electrochem Ghana. And there's the MacDan Foundation, a charitable organization. This Africa report will focus exclusively on Electrochem's latest venture, a mega salt mining project in the Ada district near the Volta River estuary. I am indebted to Wodemaya and Joy TV for the video clips used in this report, and the MacDan Group for still images and other information. The Electrochem concession sits on 41,000 acres of land, comprising mainly lagoon and associated ecosystems. For over 55 years, others had tried but failed to industrialize the production of salt from this lagoon. As a result, production was chiefly in the hands of artisanal galamseers of the district. Galamsey is an Akan term for unregulated and often illegal mining. MacDan took control of the concession 3 years ago and started production 1 year later. Today, the concession employs over 1,000 workers directly and processes 600,000 metric tons of salt per year. The ultimate target is 10 million tons. You wonder what the world does with so much salt. Besides almost every facet of food processing, salt is used in many chemical industries, the de-icing of roads, pharmaceuticals, animal feed, and much more. For over 1,000 years, Africa was a major producer of salt, when salt was equal in value to gold pound for pound. But why did MacDan think he could succeed at Ada, where everyone before him had failed?
Actually, you need courage. You need an unlimited courage. I dropped down here from the beginning. I asked myself, am I being brave or being stupid? But one thing that kept echoing in my mind that, look, 99% of the people will say you are wrong. You have to listen to them. It's either you are making a big mistake or you are making history.
Indeed, MacDan came, he saw, and he made history. MacDan's control over the lagoon incurred the wrath of the galamseers in the district. To establish a harmonious relationship, he made concessions to them. Electrochem created salt pans and distributed them to the galamseers without charge, a win-win solution. Salt mining is hazardous work. Salt quickly deteriorates the skin. So why did he choose salt production?
For me, when I look at the extractive industry, it's all dominated by foreigners. I wanted to do chemicals, not really salt. But this is just the beginning of international chemical production. So this is a raw material to scale me up. And also, Ghana happened to be one of the best places you can get the best quality of salt.
MacDan could easily deploy sophisticated machinery, but he refuses to do so, at least for now. His policy is to extend employment to large numbers of young men in the district. Thus, Electrochem relies heavily on manual labor, while minimizing the use of heavy or automated machinery. Let's hear a bit about the actual process of making salt in the Ada Lagoon.
From the intake, we have about 4 evaporators. So the brine from the sea is pumped into the lagoon. We have a lagoon, and from the lagoon we pump it into the evaporators, into our reservoirs.
Imagine the incoming seawater must travel for 26 kilometers before the final evaporation takes place.
Every day, they open up the seashore. So that's the beginning of the whole production process for the salt work. Getting seawater onto land. Purely natural, organic seawater that flows. No additives. After the seawater has been channeled from the sea into the lagoon, we use 3 vertical axial pumps to pump or lift the seawater into the bigger lagoon, which we call the evaporators. So the second stage is the evaporation stage. And that is where the plenty water molecules that are in the seawater has to evaporate. It travels a distance of about 26 kilometers between here and where it finally crystallizes so that we get the pure sodium chloride salt. During the process, the unwanted ions that are in the salt, like magnesium, calcium, which we do not eat, we do not want in the salt we produce, they get to drop behind in the lagoon as it's traveling that 26 kilometers. And by the time it reaches the crystallizing stage, we have a pure sodium chloride that everybody can enjoy.
Magdan himself often dons his boots and works with the miners in the processors.
I believe in you get what you inspect. You don't get what you expect. You don't build this industry and go and sleep to collapse. You have to inspect. That is why I'm the chief servant. That is why I get here, I work in the dyes, I work in the evaporators, just to get it how I want it.
You get what you inspect, not what you expect. That's his ethos for success. Many successful businessmen engage in humanitarian work, and Magdan is no different. Wodemeyer put the question to him if money makes him happy. His answer is quite interesting.
This money makes me happy because when you have money, when you see smiles on people's face, it makes you happy. If you don't have money to put smiles on people's face, how can you be happy? We have the biggest foundation in the country. I mean, we're building schools. We build about 9 schools. We're helping hospitals. We're building astroturfs across the country. We're helping women across the country with interest-free loans. Only women. We have over 500,000 children on our scholarship. This is the boy from the streets.
Giving back to the street.
Giving back to the street. You know, I came from the street, and I don't know how many young boys and girls can survive what I survived. This is just the beginning. I've not even reached 50% of my own potential. So why should I be happy?
9 schools, interest-free loans to women, scholarships to 500,000 children, and much more. Quite a philanthropist indeed. Let's conclude with this final advice of his, and it has to do with generational wealth.
Forgive me to say this. I don't want to chase cheap money. I want to work hard to build something, to build a legacy. I want to build a dynasty. Right? I want the youth, the youth of this country to believe in themselves. I want the youth of this country to understand that we can. No matter how difficult it is, this is our own.
Yes, that's the Africa report for this week. Believe in yourself. I think that's a very valuable lesson coming from this. This company is wholly owned by Ghanaians. There's no foreign capital involved in it. So that's another feature of this project. As with all of his subsidiaries, there are a number of other companies that he runs. And it's local capital we're talking about, right? We know that funding is a major disincentive to business for African people in the Caribbean, especially I think in Trinidad. I'm not sure about Tobago, but particularly in Trinidad, I'm not sure Tobago is equally disadvantaged as in Trinidad. But that element here is not part of a problem that he has. He does identify certain problems that he faced, but he said one of the biggest challenges is in terms of the quality of of manpower that he has. And this is one of the reasons that he works with the workers. He goes down, he works with them. And you know that phrase that he used, inspect, not expect. And that is where that converts into a better quality worker. Do not expect something. You inspect it, you work with it, you work to improve it. So, yes. Um, so this is your Africa report for this week. Next week, I am going to focus on another personality, a female personality. This time, I started with a female personality, and I'm going to rotate them: one male, one female, one male, one female. Yes. So, Renee, I was going to ask you if you want to comment on the report before we move on to our guest.
Yeah, I think it's commendable what he's doing, particularly with the salt mining. Looks like he's taking a very environmentally sustainable approach so far. It seems to be something that he's trying to do in his other ventures. So I think it's interesting. I like the idea that, like you said, you what work to inspect and not expect. So yeah, I think it's great when you see African entrepreneurs succeeding and their businesses performing at that level, and they still choosing to have it placed and localized still on the continent.
Okay, I am going to bring up information on our program for this evening. I don't know if you have yours ahead, but I have to read mine from my phone, and that's a little bit of a problem for me.
No,
Uh,
I can go ahead if you want.
yeah, we want to welcome our two guests at this time. We are going to look, as I said, at our feature. Our feature topic this evening is on crime and violence. Yes. While I'm looking for that, Renee, you can go ahead.
Right. So tonight we want to look at exploring alternative approaches and solutions to violent crime in Trinidad and Tobago. And we have Miss Danielle Frederick. She's a facilitator at the Africa Speaks Network, engaged in public re-education through various community and media projects. Ms. Frederick is also a director of the Institute of Indigenous Knowledge, Empowerment and Research, also known as the IKER Institute. And this organization runs a regenerative community farm in Diego Martin. We also have Mr. Mtima Solwazi. He is the founder of Roots Foundation and is the program coordinator for the foundation's youth intervention program called Abyssinia. Under his leadership, Roots has developed initiatives which utilize the oral traditions as a tool for cognitive behavioral therapy, social activism, civic engagement, arts education, and literacy development. Mr. Antima is a resident imam at the Youth Training Rehabilitation Center, and he has also done extensive work with the Citizen Security Program while that particular organization was still up and running.
Yeah.
So,
So, yeah, the topic: exploring alternative approaches and solutions to address violent crime in Trinidad and Tobago. And the rationale for bringing this topic forward this evening is because TNT continues to grapple with high crime rates, particularly violent crime, and previous strategies to address the situation by various agencies and using various tactics, for example, the police stop and search and so on, have all failed. And therefore, we need to develop both short and long term strategies and solutions to address this situation. So, we are going to look at crime prevention strategies, why these strategies have failed, and we are going to look at alternative strategies as well as as the role of civil society in addressing violent crime. But before we plunge into the topic, the conventional thing is to invite our guests, if they so wish, to comment on the Africa report. A brief comment, if you would like to do so. Either of you.
Um, I would like to look a little further into the entrepreneur because there were some things that I do appreciate homegrown entrepreneurship and he being the Lita extractive agency, but there were some things that I found a little bit challenging, especially in terms of sustainability, in terms of worker health and safety. That I would want to look at a little deeper, so that he is not just replicating what the external persons do, but he's better for the continent and our people than those who are extractive and not a part of who we are. So he's interesting, and I'd like to look a little more into how he does what he does.
Yeah, okay. Mtima, any
Yeah,
comment?
good evening, everyone. Well, what I like to look at is him giving back to the community, right? I think that's, for me, that's a plus, and I think our local businesses should look at that because he's giving back to the community in terms of education. He said he built a hospital, scholarships, stuff like that, and that is important because you're extracting from the environment, you're extracting from the community, the environment, but you have to also give back to the people. And I admire how he's given back. As he said, having money will make him smile because he's putting smiles on persons' faces. And I like that concept.
Yes, Daniel, I think your observations are quite in order, but I should say I'm not holding brief for him, but Macaulay's safety measures and concern for his workers are quite a few notches above what I have seen in similar salt works in Senegal, in Mali, in Somalia, in Mauritania, and so on. It doesn't justify, of course, any reduction in safety measures. But I think from all those that I have seen, I think he is best prepared to deal with safety measures and to protect workers while they're in the water. Actually, all of them have very, very tall waterproof boots. You don't see that in a lot of places. On sustainable development, I am not qualified to speak about that, so I'll leave that alone. But I guess they're very well aware of that because they're in a very sort of sensitive ecosystem as well, and very close to the mouth of the Volta River, where other, activities take place like talipia farming and that type of thing. So I guess they should be, never could tell, they should be aware of that sensitivity in the environment as well. Okay, so let's move on to tonight's feature, and that is the question of violent crime. How are we going to deal with it? I would like someone, both of you really, to speak to some of the concerns that I've had for quite some time, and that is how the education system, what I would like to say, a dysfunctional education system, which apparently became even more dysfunctional with the education for all opening up, because what we have is that a lot of students are pushed from primary into secondary who are totally unprepared for secondary school. Some of them are barely literate, if we can use that word at all. And 5 years in secondary school system is 5 years of frustration for a lot of these people. And then they graduate out of that system uh, unfit for most employment opportunities because they are not trained either in academic areas or in what we can call hands-on skilled areas. So I want you to look at that, because to me, the rise in violent crime parallels the emergence of education for all, late 90s and the early 2000s. right? I'm not saying there wasn't a lot of crime at that time, but that is one thing I would like to address this evening. And also, the way that government actually facilitate violent crime, not directly or perhaps consciously, but we know that the unemployment relief program, for example, was a scene of struggle for controlling turf by a lot of communities, and there was a lot of violence deployed in order to control and manage who gets employment and that type of thing. So, and that also seems to have a parallel development as these projects expanded. Violent crime also expanded. So those are two things I would like you to address, but not necessarily at the first thing. So I'm inviting you now to make some preliminary comments with respect to the subject matter this evening. Danielle, you want to go first?
Thank you, Dr. Fergus. So let's start with what is currently happening and why it may not be as effective as we'd like it to be effective. Stop and frisk and other increased policing methods, judicial methods, all of them address the situation at the end. It doesn't address causes and it doesn't impact how we could prevent ourselves from even reaching there. And if it is we are looking at the really coming away from what we are currently experiencing, it is also not very sustainable. The strategies, the perceptions used in the criminal justice systems would be limited also because the persons who are making and creating these policies are also impacted by the unaddressed issues that is present, pervasive, and ignored in our wider society, which contributes to crime. So, and as I think we could all agree that if it is our leaders and policymakers don't have a concept or understanding of what are our core issues that create these situations that make this situation, the environment so conducive to violent crime, then we are going to not come up with any solutions that are sustainable and it will continually be flawed. To me, most alternative solutions require a certain amount of reset, um, people leadership, and creation of spaces where the people are a part of the solution because the people are the ones that are most impacted. Because as we know, with violent crimes, the persons in these communities who are most negatively impacted or stigmatized by violent crime are the ones who are the first victims or the major victims of the self same crimes. So I am almost certain that they have solutions for how to address their issues and challenges. Well, not there, but our issues and challenges that we have not really explored. And I agree with you, Dr. Fergus, that our education system contributes majorly to where we are at now. My focus really is that not necessarily to make it better in its current incarnation, but to reevaluate it, to revamp it, and to make it work for more people than just those who need to be certified. So those are my initial thoughts.
Yes, I'm Timo.
Yes, good evening again. You mentioned the students who being sent to the secondary schools that 0 to 30%, because that is the category of students with the whole education for all, right? Before I really get into that, I want to make mention that I was at a graduation today of the Empower TT. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Empower TT. It's under the Ministry of Sport and Community Development. And at that graduation, we had over about 82 boys graduating, right? And they would have come from communities that have high incidences of crime, or what we call like high risk or criminogenic communities. And one of the young men on the stage today said that he is grateful to Minister Shamfa Kujo Lewis for creating this space because there are many numbers in the room right now. And you see, I'm sure you all understand what I'm saying, right? And I'm sure the listeners and the viewers and you all know about the 6, 7, 8, 9. And he's saying that there are many numbers here. And one of the things about the success of that program is making the young men, and Danielle spoke about it, feel a part of the process, a part of the space. And I think that is a big challenge right now with our youth. They don't feel a part of, right? Now, I'm speaking from experience and knowledge. I worked Silver for 15 years, and I know Silver have the Junior Life Center, which is supposed to cater for that caption, that 0 to 30%. I was unaware that they were sending 0 to 30% into secondary schools, right? Renee mentioned I work with Citizen Security Program, and we were called to a certain secondary school in East Port of Spain, and the teachers were complaining because they are not equipped to teach children with that low level of literacy, right? So when you have a child who having challenges reading and writing in a classroom, right? If they reach Form 3, they do plenty. If they reach the Form 3, because some of them drop out before, and some of them die on the street because they cannot cope with the schoolwork. There is no real support system for them to help them with that literacy. I was sharing with Renee earlier. We did a workshop in YTRC, a spoken word workshop. And when we told the young men, okay, time to write your poems, one young man said one time, "Sir, I have a serious problem." I said, "What is that?" "Yeah, I cannot read and write." I said, "Hey, don't worry. This is not an English exam, right? Express yourself how you feel. Share your thoughts on the paper," which he did, right? And then we looked at fixing the grammar, editing it, or as I told you, what one of our members say, make it sexy. So I think having these young people feel a part of, right, is one of the challenges that they face. And before I hand you back over, I just want to share quickly a program we just completed on a school violence reduction program in 4 secondary schools. And we created a school safety guide toolkit, which was led by the students, because we asked them, Dr. Fergus, Danielle, and Renee, what are the causes of violence in your school and how can it be stopped? Most times you want to solve the problem, Danielle said it, and we're not including those, right, who, if you want to say, are part of the problem because they're affected first, right? And it's interesting. 2 schools, hear what the students said. "Sir, if we fix the relationships between Miss and them," and just for information, Miss and them mean Miss and Sir. It's interesting, these students do not refer to the sirs as Sir, and that is an indicament of how they view the male in their lives and in society. So Miss and them, so the them is sirs, right? Unless that Sir has an impact in their life, they will call his surname Mr. Fergus, Mr. So and so, but they say Miss and them. If we fix the relationship between Miss and them, violence will be reduced in school. Because the student said, if I'm a student, Dr. Fergus is Sir, if I could disrespect Dr. Fergus, Renee's Miss, if I could disrespect Miss, who is Danielle for me to fight with? I don't disrespect Sir and Miss. So that relationship has been broken. And students said, let's repair that relation. Students said that. Students said that. Right? I want to end with that for now.
Okay, so Renee, you can take over from here. But Mtima, that respect thing goes back to the root of the African culture system that we all knew as young people. I'm not sure how young Danielle is, but I'm sure you and I would have grown up in that, where at least I tried to track when this thing ruptured. And to
Yes.
me, somewhere around the 70s, into the 70s, of course, it's not related to the Black Power movement at all, but it's related somehow, I think, to the expansion, that phase in the secondary school system where they had the dual system. Remember that? The dual
Mhm.
system where children were leaving home all 4, 3 o'clock, 3:30 in the morning, and all of that, the shift school system. To me, that was where the thing ruptured. I don't know. I don't know if there's a cause and effect, but I know that was the time that it happened with the shift in the school system where parental control suddenly diminished because children were on their own for such long periods, out of school, out of home, and drifting all over the place. Okay, over to you, Renee.
So I think it's interesting that you're bringing that shift system up, Dr. Fergus, because in speaking to one of the members of Emancipation Support Committee, that's Miss Anna Maria Mora, she had, was talking to us about why she started her organization, Mariama Children's Museum and Teen Turf. And she said it was to provide a space for these children where, okay, I'm not in school, I don't have any parental supervision, so I'm going to try to do what I want to do. And she said she really was trying to provide a space where parents didn't have to pay a lot of money and they know their children would have been supervised, they would have been engaged in some positive activity. And then going back to a bit of what Miss Danielle is saying, and Mr. Mtima is saying our education system, there is a gap. I believe that a huge gap, and Mr. Ntima would have kind of touched on this, is that we aren't teaching children emotional intelligence, so that they feel that when they are hurt or they are wronged or they are disrespected, that their only solution or the appropriate response is to also disrespect, is to also carry it up a notch and maybe physically violent. And Dr. Fergus, you brought that up just now, saying it goes back to this, the some of the ideology behind African traditions, where you have to have a certain level of respect and reverence for your elders. So you could have been upset with something that Miss admonished you the day before, but when you reach in school that morning, you have to tell Miss, and you see Miss good morning, and with no attitude, you know. But Mr. Antim, I'm interested to hear like what like particular programs or like strategies did citizen security program adopt, because I know you said, and not just you but a lot of people had sort of, was a little baffled that that particular organization had come to an end. So what do you think was some of the approaches that you all adopted that you found that worked the best or
We,
made
we,
a
we,
significant
we
impact?
basically gave back the power to the communities.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a community action officer,
Okay.
and we set up CAC's community action councils, which was run by the community. And when we say by the community, we're not picking out the nice, polished ones. And you turn on the block to be part of the action committee, right? And they were responsible for saying what they, well, we do some research, right? But they will tell us what the problems were, right? Because they know how to solve the problem that they may not have the tools, right? And I always like to quote Father Gerard Panton, right, in terms of speaking about respectful intervention, right? And I attended Soval and I worked Soval, and then CSP I realized, that's the culture. You go with respectful intervention. You don't go to tell them what is their problem and how to solve their problems. So you put that power back into the community, right? But I just want to really, before I continue, continue what Dr. Fergus said. Dr. Fergus, our elder said to me recently, he'd have been born in the 50s, because violence is not new to Trinidad and Tobago. And we could go back as far as slavery in state violence, but when you look at that 50s, 60s, I mentioned that 70s era, youth were involved in violence, right? Back in those days. But the youth that time had ideology, right? Pan-African movement, Garveyism, later on Malcolm X, we had all Stokely Michael. So we had ideology. So back then, men, and I was born in 72, so I get in this information from the elders, right? So you have people becoming Rasta, not Rasta City. People becoming Muslim, not Muslim City. Now, fast track today, youth, more violence, more guns, but they have no ideology. The elder told me, Mtima, the youth now have no ideology. And then I said to myself, I said, wait, but they have a philosophy. And I heard a guy in Project 600 said it, right? They have a philosophy, fully done and fully evil. When in your time, Dr. Fergus, people were striving to be intellectuals, right? We had a lot of island scholars. Now we have young men and women saying, I'm fully done and I'm fully evil, right? So I too been trying to trace back when this thing broke down. And for me, it was in the 80s. It was in the 80s because the heroes of the 70s, the heroes of the 60s and the 70s, both men and women in the 80s, my dear viewers and listeners, and Dr. Fergus and Danielle and Renee, most of them, a lot of them end up becoming pipers and sprangers. In the 80s, the men, the men who were the leaders in the communities, what you call them, Bajan or whatever it is, a lot of them were sprangers and pipers. The women, the matriarchs, they became pipers. And that is where the thing started to break down. Because I was a teenager in the 80s. And I'm telling you, when your friend mother is a spranger or a piper, it's real hard to negotiate that in a block, Dr. Fergus. So you know how to be real violent and angry, because long ago, if you tell a man, boy, your mother so-and-so is big fight, but your mother is a piper, right? So that is where it started to break down, when the heroes, our heroes, most of them became pipers and sprangers, right? And it broke down. My generation, we started to break the rules. So those who came after us met no rules. That is why you could run in a house, kill children, kill old people. That was nothing long ago. You respected Tanti and Granny. You respected children. But the rules had been broken, and we have anarchy right now. It's just
Okay,
crazy.
I want to introduce a gender perspective for well, either of you, but mainly for Danielle to respond to. And yes, just a quick observation with respect to what you said. When you talk about violence, students, young people in particular, even school children were violent in the 50s, so on. But we're talking about crime, and I noticed you left out the crime. They were violent, but these violent people were not into crime. And
No,
what you're saying there is in the 80s.
that's why the elder said that ideology was an
Yeah,
ideology.
something happened in the 80s. You're saying right now. Okay, so I
The
accept
70s
that.
had an ideology. Now we have a philosophy. Fully done,
Right.
fully evil.
But these violent people, or let's say we agree the violence was always there, but this tendency towards greater criminality. These people are not less intelligent, but they're less fortunate. They're growing up in less fortunate circumstances. And they're mostly males as well. So you introduce the drug element into the picture, but it's mostly young males we're talking about. And I go back to the school system because I've spent all my life in the school system. I observed over the years that schools were coming more and more dominated by female teaching staff, to the extent where sometimes in a staff of 20 something, you might have 3 or 4 males sometimes. Now, in the absence of men, and I think Antima referred to that, they talk about miss, but they don't even refer to
Yeah, miss
sir.
and them.
So now that element there, does that have something to do with the mentality that young men are leaving the school system with, that this absence of a male figure, male models and so on, and they're surrounded. I'm not saying anything wrong with females, because people might say, okay, I grew up in a single parent home and so on, and look at me. But I'm not talking about an individual experience. I'm talking about it from a collective perspective, right? And does that have some impact? Because if it doesn't, then we are saying that um, a more balanced, gender balanced staff would also have no different impact. And I don't agree with that. I think it's important to look at that element of the education system. So while I talked about education for all, I want to make it clear I'm not against education for all, but I am against putting people into secondary school who are not prepared, who are not ready, and therefore we need to fix the primary school.
Yeah.
We need to fix that school, and we need to fix the staffing in schools as well. So could you comment on that, Daniel?
Okay. So actually, as I was about to come in with early childhood, I see one of the
Somebody here.
comments in the thing saying from Karina Joseph, there was a big change in the delivery of early childhood care and education, what we knew as preschool. This is most times left out of the conversation when talking about the impact of education on our nation's children. A major shift was made in the way we educate children, starting with ECCE, and little to no conversation were had with parents, etc. This was in 2010. How can a child spend 7 years in primary school alone and leave without basic reading and writing skills? Where's the accountability? I have to second, third, quadruple what Karina is saying. And it all comes back to the education system being even tweaked even further to focus more on passing exams rather than equipping our children for life and meeting the challenges of life. So you see a lot of programs that dealt with life skills, that dealt with emotional intelligence, that dealt with all of those things being removed to pare down the curriculum to what is academically testable. And is we have a lot of interventions for secondary school, some for primary school, but as Karina said, the interventions need to go further back or start earlier to
Yeah.
the preschool. And that is something that um, a professional like herself always mentions. Once it is you're dealing with preschool, you are always going to get the parent, because they are parent and guardian of these minor children will be engaged in order to support the children. We have several things coming up, and Dr. Fergus, I do agree and appreciate that there might be a gendered perspective to why it is we are experiencing challenges. But whether you are dealing with male or female, we have some things that we need to get right first of all. We tend to focus on violent crimes. But what feeds violent crimes are the crimes that we very rarely speak about and feel comfortable with and facilitate within our community. And that is the so called white collar criminals. When we have people not paying taxes in the tunes of billions of dollars, then we have to rely on philanthropy, which is subjective to whatever or whoever that businessman or woman's interests are, versus if it is those same tax dollars were paid towards the state, it could be evenly distributed to services that address some of our core needs. So the violence starts from within the system that allow these people to dodge the tax, and it trickles down into the violence that is experienced economically, the violence that is the teachers are frustrated, limited resources, limited training. Why are we having teachers in school with these frustrations? Because the teachers are a part of the community that we live in, right? And I do agree with both yourself and the gentleman when we say that we see that shift around the 80s. What happened in the 80s that caused that shift? The ideologies remain the same. There are ideologies in underpinning what our youths are doing. The ideologies have changed. The ideologies are now socialism and more capitalistic, and it is less community based and less self understanding focus. So we had men like Shabaka Cambon and McCandle Dagande coming out of the University of the West Indies and coming into communities and teaching and imparting knowledge into these communities with the cottage meetings and with all those kind of community interactions. And that is something that we hardly see right now, where the academics come out of the universities and come out of their academic spaces and break down their knowledge and learnings to the man on the ground and their fellow persons. So there is a divide there that capitalism went in and filled because the newly accepted blacks who were able to work in the banks felt that they were now a part of the system, and the system would fill this void of the education. But the system was never meant to educate the people they were educating. So the middle class blacks who would have sacrificed time, energy, money, and all of those things coming into the communities to reason with their brothers, like the gentleman who wrote Groundings with My Brothers. Those middle class blacks went on to the business of capitalistic gains and left education, ideology, community building to the capitalists who were not invested in their communities. So what we had was an ideology shift from who am I as an African? Who am I as an Indian person? Who am I as a Trinidadian? And we had it into what can I gain, get, more money, more power, more everything. And it reflected the ideologies that were peddled to us from the global north. So the ideology remains the same. What we need to start to do is exactly what it is the gentleman and citizens protection started to do. We need to go back to the communities and begin to have the communities direct the solutions. We need to make the bridges, connect the bridges back to the communities between us and, in particular, our communities, between the academics, the middle class, the comfortable ones whose bellies are filled by the system, and those whose bellies are not filled, so that we begin to empathize within the group, so that when it is people start talking about things that are limiting to us, we are able to advocate in rooms where those same grassroots people are not allowed. And we begin to create these spaces for them to be able to, and their thoughts to be reflected in those rooms. So the ideology hasn't changed, the education has changed, and it has been focused and narrowed to exams and passing exams rather than self development. And a understanding of not only what I can get from the system, but what are my responsibilities? What am I supposed to contribute? This is a give and take. Because if you listen to the lay Trinidadian, and this has nothing to do with class, we don't know as a community what it takes for our social programs. We don't know the cost of healthcare. So we waste medication, we waste doctors' times, we waste professional times, we curse out we don't know the cost of education. There are parts in the Caribbean where you have to pay for secondary school education. If you were to ask most Trinidadians what was the cost of their child going to secondary and primary school, they have no clue, but there's a cost to that. Where are those types of conversations so that we appreciate not only what we have, but how we can build upon them? So the ideologies remain the same. What has taken over from the ideologies, we have left our communities to or in the hands of the persons who never created anything for us or for the wider community in the first place.
Great, great. So we have identified at least two key areas that I think need a lot of research. We have identified the 80s as a sort of a turning point in the breakdown of society on a whole, breakdown in many ways. And we are saying that values, we need to look at values. Values would have changed, perhaps being corrupted around the same time. So one is the education system, and we're talking about from kindergarten or preschool, mainly primary and kindergarten, because if we fix that, I think we would fix a lot of the problems. And then we're talking about this socialization. So we have identified those key aspects now. So it's not just about policing, it's about looking at the problem structurally and systematically and not looking at the tail end of the problem, because you cannot solve it from that from that position. You have to get to the root. You cannot look at that end of it to solve the problem. You have to understand the root, where it starts, how it started, and what broke down at that time. How did it manage to break down, and so on. So we have crossed the top of the hour, and we should have said goodbye to our listeners on 91.1.
Thought City.
Miss that opportunity. But so we can take our closing remarks now, unless Renee, you want to ask a question, and then we take closing remarks.
No questions. I think it has been a really exciting discussion. I think we need to continue. So I think there is more to examine and discuss. Um, but yeah, I'm excited to continue the discussion and to get feedback from other persons who are operating in their own capacity to address this issue of crime. Yeah.
Before we wrap up, Danielle, I was going to ask you this about the Indigenous Knowledge Empowerment and Research Institute that you run. I'm sure that must have some impact on personality development and empowering self confidence in people and so on. Could you tell us a little bit about that and how successful that has been?
Okay. So IKER Institute, we have partnered with the Bosse Community Council on several projects like community library and different developmental projects where the youth workers are concerned. And our primary focus is on agriculture and how agriculture impacts how we do what it is we do. And how agriculture is pervasive and is able to teach us many different elements of self development, introspection, and life skills. Because what we eat is very important, and how we take care of the earth is very important to sustain in life, and not only sustain in life, but also appreciating those elements of life that we take for granted. Because when you look at soil, people very when they plant, everybody looks at the plant, they look at the top layer, the water, but few people look at soil and how much life is teeming under the soil in order for the soil to be able to produce fruits, vegetables, and that type of thing. And when it is you get into agriculture, you get into so many areas about life development, how we interact with each other, how we structure our society. And part of our coming together, we always encourage a reasoning space. We would sometimes choose a topic. If it is we having a guy up, we will choose a topic. Before COVID, it was much more robust. We would choose a topic, and sometimes we would have a specialist, but we would want to encourage the persons who are invited to share their opinions about the topics. And then on Sundays, when it is we usually meet to engage the space and to do the agricultural elements of it. After lunch, we would also create a space where general reasoning can happen. So that community, that back and forth between different members of our communities persons who are volunteers, persons from within the community could occur, and we could share our lived experiences, thoughts, and ideas about what is going on. And thus far, it's a space, a safe space that we continue to develop. And in part of developing it also is a teaching and learning process.
Yes, I think if more people get together, we realize that this country is not as hopeless as it might seem. And Tima, could you tell us a bit about Roots, your Roots Foundation, what you're doing positive that impact on the society? And just for curiosity, why did you use the term Abyssinia in your thing, or did you use it?
Yes. So, well, Roots is an acronym, Reflections of Our Oral Traditions. And to answer the question quickly, why we use Abyssinia, that project called Abyssinia Journey of Change was started when the Rasta city, Muslim city wars entered the primary schools, right? Because they started to go into the schools, and we're getting reports that students demarking the area. So this is Rasta city, you can't come here. And why we use Abyssinia, right? In the time of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, when he was being persecuted by his own people, his own tribe, his own family, he sent a small contingent to a place called Abyssinia, which is now called, but I'm pretending to convert Dr. Fergus. You will know
a place they call Abyssinia.
All right, that is now called Ethiopia, right? And to seek refuge, right? So, and it was with a king called King Negus, right? So now we didn't get into all that with the children, but what we did, a guy called Gary Grant, who's a pastor, and myself, right, was the imam at YTC. So you have a Muslim and a Christian, and we went to the schools and we shared our story of where we came from, of the challenges and our struggles, right? Not to glorify the past, but to show that even though you may have a rocky start, you could come out and you could produce something of yourself, right? So Roots Foundation now, we have three main programmings. We have, which fall under the Abyssinia, which is where we go on. There's a community outreach program or school outreach, right? We have different components under Abyssinia. We also have festivals where we use the spoken word, the oral traditions, right? And we connect our young people. We don't want them to think spoken word poetry is a North American concept. So early o'clock, we let them know about Cheryl Byron and Lancelot Lane, and let them know that these are the mothers of spoken word rap. So, and we also have a media program called Beyond the Lens. At present, we're in the process of opening a school. So Danielle will reach out to you, opening a school, right? And when Danielle was talking about her agricultural program, a smile. We recently, under the Abyssinia program, did an agriculture program to reduce gender-based violence in primary school children. Because when we were small, they'll give us a little pea, we put it in a toilet paper, and we take good care of this, right? If it grew, we smile. If it died, we cry. So we use that agriculture to teach the children, you say you could talk to your plants, so talk to your friend, be kind to your friend, like. And it was a success with two primary schools, St. Crispin and St. Agnes, right? And right now, we are doing a program called Make It to 30, because we are seeing the statistics where these young men are barely reaching 30, right? So we have this program called Make It to 30. Last week we did public speaking. This week we're doing gender-based violence awareness, right? We're going to teach them business etiquette. We're going to a whole heap of programming so they could get that urge that, hey, I could live to be 30. And Dr. Fergus and y'all, when I was at Serve, I didn't want to share this. I want to share this. When I was at Serve Hall, trainees school children don't like to eat box lunch. They don't like to eat box lunch. Now we eat it with our eyes. I tell the box lunch people, make the thing look presentable, right? But guess how I started to get all the students to eat box lunch? I told them the story of Audrey Jeffers. I told the students the story of Audrey Jeffers to show the impact that had. I saw a young woman, she's a big woman now, right, recently, and she said, sir, I'm telling her friend, you see, that man ain't easy. That man had all of you eating box lunch because he tell you about Audrey Jeffers. We need to connect our young people with our heroes of the past. We have heroes, We need to connect them so they can understand that they have a legacy, right? Children started to eat box lunch because they understood who Audrey Jeffers was. And I told them, every time you drive on the highway, remember that box lunch you threw yesterday or you threw it today, right? Audrey Jeffers we had those children eating box lunch because of the story of Audrey Jeffers. We need to connect them to that past.
Yes, so we have to wrap up in the next few minutes, but I'm a little bit unsatisfied with the Abyssinia explanation you give me there because no, because you see, I in the Africa report I gave, I talked about a name. The name is important, not only to humans but also to places, countries, and so on. Yes. Names are important. Name impact a certain kind of life to something. And yes, Muhammad would have sent his family there. And he would have sent them to Abyssinia in his language. That was their reference to the place, but that wasn't the name that the Ethiopians. Even Ethiopia is a foreign term, but the Aksumite Empire was in existence at the time when Muhammad's family went there. The maps, the indigenous maps would have not have said Abyssinia at all. Right, then the Europeans adopted the name Abyssinia when they, came up on the other side at the end of the 15th century, and because the maps of the Mediterranean, North Africa, and so on were at the time in Arabic maps as such, because the Arabs were the map makers generally, right? So that the names were in Arabic, and that's why Abyssinia was attached to that place, but. That was not a local name at all. So a little bit concerned about that.
Don't be concerned. I've been educated also.
yeah, I'm a little bit concerned about that because it's a colonial name. That's why the Ethiopia dropped the name. They went back to Ethiopia because of biblical references and so on. Because the Bible at that time, the version they used was written in Greek, and Ethiopia comes from the Greek language. So they adopted that. Anyway.
Interesting.
Yeah, anyway, we can have some closing comments now, and then Renee, you can start looking at the chat group. So when they're finished, you can speak to the people who would have dropped some comments and so on. Yeah, so closing comments, Danielle, and then Mtima.
So at the end of it, or at least at the beginning of it, most alternative solutions require reset and people leadership in order for it to be sustainable. But the state has a role to play in facilitating these people-led solutions. There are CBOs and NGOs in the community that are doing fantastic work, effective work, but they're doing it with very tight resources. And there is where the state comes in to partner with them in order to be more effective so that the solutions are not literally plasters, but they're sustainable, people-driven, and they can grow with the people in the communities that are most affected. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.
To add to what Danielle said, I just want to include youth. We need to include the youth in the decision making. Let them be a part of the process, and also, please do not discount the youth man on the block, right? Give them that opportunity too, because give them that opportunity. Just give them that opportunity. Ask them. We shouldn't have somebody coming from Canada, right, to have them speaking. We should have them speaking. Go into the communities. And I always say, but I shouldn't say all, I'm saying this recently here, not everybody equipped to go into our community. For whatever reason, I respect that, right? But you may have the finances to support those who go into the community. And if you don't have the finances to support those who go into the community, you could have the network to link those who go into the communities with those resources, be it financial or human resources. So there's no excuse for us all coming together, right, to bring back our community, our country, right? And as you said, Dr. Fergus, it's not doom and gloom, right? We have real hope and we can do it, right? Together with what Danielle said, Renee, you, the comments in the chat, we can do it. What I sorted at Empower, we can do it. That's my
Thank you. Thank you very much, and hope to see you again sometime. Thank you for your valuable contributions.
Yes, Dr. Fergus.
Yes, and we'll be sure to invite you again at some time on this program. Thank you, and have a good night. Yes, Renee?
Danielle.
Yeah, so I just want to play because people are starting to utilize that voice note options. I just want to play one voice note and then we'll go through the very briefly the comments that people would have left on our social media platforms. So this is our voice note.
Good evening, Indaba family. I believe that the problem facing us as a people is that we do not know who we are as a people because we were not taught who we were. In the schools, our curriculum teaches us that our history starts on a slave ship, and therefore our people have no sense of identity. They do not know where they come from, they do not know what they're supposed to be doing, and they do not know where they are going.
Yeah, so that's gentleman did not leave his name, but I want to thank you for sharing your opinion with us via our WhatsApp number. Well, Miss Danielle would have mentioned quite a few comments made by Miss Karina Joseph, where she was saying that when we talk about the education system or when we talk about interventions, we really sort of negate the level of the ECCE or pre-K as we would know it. We want to acknowledge Sis Jalen. She has been keeping up with the discussions and definitely sharing her perspective. She talks about, scientifically crying releases stress hormones. And I guess going back to that idea, that concept of emotional intelligence and how do we deal as young persons and as a society with negative emotions. She also speaks about that she believes that we have a high rate of domestic violence here in Trinidad and Tobago. We are also restating some of the perspectives made earlier about needing to have that respect for our elders in our community. She called it healthy fear. And she also spoke about this need to revamp the curriculum. A revamping of the curriculum is needed. Education cannot just be book sense alone. What happened with our trade schools? And that's interesting because there are some children who, for one reason or another, may not be academically inclined or performing the best academically, but they might be, skills with a trade. And if they feel like their worth is only based on their grades, of course, they're not going to feel good about themselves and that, they may lash out. Right. So I really want to thank Sister Jalen for joining the discussion with us so much. Yes, Dr. Fergus.
Yes, so that's it for this program on the 25th of September, and we are going to be here again next week for another exciting program. Thank you, Danielle. Thank you, and Timo. Thanks to Ruskin in behind the controls at 91.1. Of course, he would have left us already. Renee, we know you would be always with us, although we may not be seeing you up front. So thank you for being a good co-host this evening. And of course, I don't know where Sister Zach is, but I'm sure she's listening attentively.
Most definitely in the background.
Thank you, Sister Zach, for monitoring everything for us. Thanks to those who shared their views and comments with us. See you again next week. This is Indaba, ESCTT, Indaba, where knowledge grows. See you next week.